My role in Ebb Flow is as the project manager. So I manage a team of creative professionals in the creation of a series of products that explore the history of Savannah.
What what does that mean?
We focus on neighborhoods that have been blighted and we look at how they've changed over time. So we really try to invite the citizens to understand what on the ground makes these neighborhoods unique and special. Savannah is very much like other cities in that it is always trying to brand itself. It's trying to understand what it is as a community, what it means to be a citizen here. You know, it's not unlike in Chicago. People in Chicago want to find out what's unique about Chicago. And these projects really try to map what is unique about Savannah, the citizens, the seminal events, the places that have shaped its development.
What have you found?
We found really amazing things. We start with an oral history process. So over the past couple of years, we've interviewed 6 people over the age of 100. And their concept of time, their understanding of the world is so incredibly different from ours that it's amazing. When you talk to somebody like Thelma Hodges, who was the first cheerleader at Savannah High School, or was a Rosie the Riveter, or actually saved an African American man from a mob of angry white men, it really does speak to what it was to live in the Jim Crow South as a woman participating in the coastal economy, as a woman participating in the daily transactions that drive racial interaction. It's amazing, it really is.
What does it mean to live in the Jim Crow South?
After slavery ended, after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued and all the slaves were freed, Southerners had to figure out a way to conceptualize the issue of race. Okay, if you're not bound and you weren't a citizen before, but now you are a citizen, what does it mean to live in the South? So the daily transactions, buying food, etc., all those things had to be negotiated. If you read the Savannah newspaper in the 1880s or the 1870s, one of the interesting things is you'll see white people talking about how blacks didn't behave properly. And after slavery ends, they try to construct laws to constrain them, to put them back in their proper place. So living in the Jim Crow South meant that there were a series of laws that constrained every act that African Americans entered into in the daily landscape. Where they bought their food, how they worked, what kind of jobs they had. If you look at something for like Southeastern Shipyard, for instance, African Americans, despite FDR's, I think it was a 1941 law he issued, they could only work as porters or other menial positions that had no hope of advancement. They left all hope for equality at the time gate at Southeastern Shipyard.
What is the Ebb Flow Project?
For the past couple of years, the city has really looked at Eastern Savannah and tried to document its history. We have worked with a series of partners to do so. So Ebb Flow is a history that we created, as well as a couple of other things. It's basically a multimedia project. We have created this publication as well as a website, an iPhone application. We have looked at creating a documentary through a partnership with AWOL. AWOL is a youth development organization that focuses on saving kids. And what we created was a program by which they could work with citizens to document their history and then transform that into a video journalism piece. The kids at AWOL set up interviews, went out and interviewed people who had participated in the Ebb Flow Project, people who had contributed oral histories. So they interviewed people like the Robersons, who had lived in East Savannah most of their lives, over 50 years, and asked them questions about daily life. What was it like? What has changed over time? What was it like in the 1950s? And then after that post-production or that pre-production process was over, they went back and created what we call the string out, basically edited the piece, and then from that point forward, we turned it over to professionals putting it together.
I think what was so compelling about the stories is that the kids had the opportunity to hear those stories, and the citizens from the east side of Savannah really felt like, wow, I get a chance to tell a kid my story. And so that part, just to see that connection and the kids see the importance of that story,
And
that was 2 years ago.
yeah, and more importantly, even with that story, many of the kids talked about how they heard it from blacks and whites. So there's a lot of segregation that they saw and they heard about in documenting the story, but they also heard about a lot of unity and togetherness, things that the communities were doing the same, and how that could inform their future moving forward for Savannah.
Yeah, I think that's key. And just to expound on what she says, a lot of time, there's no secret when most people think of the South, there's a certain perception or a line that divides the black and white. And so to focus actually on bridging everything is important, and it seems like you have a greater outcome if you do that. So maybe if we practice on a universal scale, it'll probably be a lot better for everybody.
And that was a big takeaway for the kids, and they're learning their history in Savannah.
All right, hip hop. You know. I guess what we want to do after a Q&A is just basically an opportunity for us to talk and to ask you questions. And we kind of talked to you earlier about what AWOL's role in terms of this project. We need to start by a round of applause. Give it up for Michelle Hunt. When she conceptualized the idea, our role was to do exactly what y'all saw just now. So how many of y'all, by show of hands, were with us last year when we went on? Okay.
Good bit.
All
Good
right.
bit of folks.
Got a good
Good
bit
bit
of
of
people
folks.
in here? Okay, cool.
So one of the things we wanted to ask you guys is, what did you, I mean, come on. Anyway, what we wanted to ask you guys is, what did you learn from the project? What were your takeaways from the project? And most importantly, this was a very unique way to learn history. How many of you actually learned something that you didn't know about Savannah's history before the project? Good. Good job. Good job. So, Nigel, tell me what your takeaway was from the project. One of your biggest history takeaways. Is it something that you learned that you didn't even know? On the spot, Johnny, on the spot.
One of the biggest takeaways that I learned about the history that I didn't know about was the segregation of people coming together. Because when I hear the word segregation, I see the whites and the blacks not having no communication at all. And when I was behind the scenes listening to them talk, saying that they would actually come together, help each other out, that was kind of new to me, because I thought that segregation means you stay this way, we stay over here, don't bother us at all. And I was really kind of moved by that, because I didn't know that it was like that, especially down here.
So actually what you saw was something different from what you might have learned in your history book, was that it was just segregated and that's what it was, but you actually learned something different.
Yeah.
Okay, good takeaway. Anybody else?
Jason?
One of my biggest takeaways was learning about the unity that the citizens of LePageville had. You know, it was like, even though they weren't in the best community, actually it was like the worst, they still were able to come together and, you know, and prosper from that. Like things like, just simple things like rent parties, when they would like just throw a party in their house and sell little like candies or drinks or something like that, just so they could raise rent, and the whole community would pitch in just so that person would, you know, be able to get their rent paid. And just, I don't know, seeing the unity there, it moved me.
Autumn, tell us, can you expound on the LePageville experience? You remember when we went across the front of the street? What was that like?
The LePageville experience, it was sort of eerie at first, because I never knew what LePageville was. I've driven past that side of President Street and all that countless times before, but I've never actually seen LePageville, the sign, or the cemetery. And I didn't even know it was a cemetery, I just saw LePageville. But going in there and finding out there's bodies buried in there and no tombstones or anything like that, it was creepy at first, but then the history that he told us behind it, it was just so enlightening that I wouldn't have known from like my grandparents or my mother or anything like that. It's for somebody who actually had experience with it, and who's actually been there around that time, or their parents or their grandparents have been there around that time. And and just the feel of it, you know, it was just it's slightly overwhelming, but it was still an enlightening experience.
Wow. You remember something symbolic happening that day? We were all listening around.
Symbolic was, it was like a tree branch hanging from a tree, and it was making a noise like a door opening and closing, but it was just a tree branch. It was like, I was like, all right, let's go.
Like the door was opening and
Closing, and it was just a tree branch hanging from a tree. I don't understand, but yeah, it was fun.
What did y'all think about this format for learning history? Because one of the things that, you know, everybody goes to history class. How many people absolutely love history class? Oh, come on, no. How many people actually enjoy learning history in this format, and where you're actually going in it by doing a documentary, using media production, using your skills?
And it's like more hands-on. It's better because it's storytelling, and everybody remembers storytelling.
Yes.
Like just reading it in a book is not. It's not sufficient for our minds. We like hands-on stuff, and we like to go out and experience stuff for ourselves and actually see what they're talking about. Actually see the places that they played in when they were our age. Just seeing a picture in a book, it's not satisfying for us. We want to go there and see it.
Because the people who wrote the book, they didn't go through that. And even if they did, they weren't writing about their experience. Mm-hmm. So, if I wish I was a part of it, it was definitely a more hands-on, fundamental experience to watch that.
Well, that's a good thing, Jeff, because this is your first year in my block. So, tell us, what was your takeaway in terms of where do you see yourself, and what do you want to do with history based on what you saw and what the kids did last year?
With that, like, it really inspired me to do a lot more research and understanding about past times in Savannah. And even beyond Savannah, you know, just about where I'm from and understanding what my people have been through and what other people have been through as well.
Good deal. Some of my other new students, any other takeaways from the new students who that was your first time actually seeing the other kids work?
I thought it was really, in a way, well, it changed my perspective in a way because you guys interviewed people that lived in my neighborhood, and it just made me feel like, because from me living there, I wouldn't expect so much history to have happened there, and anything as significant as that, and that's something they really don't teach you in the textbook. So, and then that corner store they were showing, I ride and walk past that almost every day. So I was like, wow. It's like, I didn't expect that at all. Like, wow.
Well, I got a question for you guys. My thing was about the whole Savannah, you know, like East Savannah. Did y'all know there was a difference between the east side of Savannah and the neighborhood East Savannah?
Yeah.
That was one lesson I learned.
Yeah, it was lesson you learned.
Me too.
Yeah, I've lived in Savannah 16 years, and Miss Roberson from the video, when I told her, I was like, yeah, you know, I stayed on East Savannah. She was like, where at, baby? And I told her we lived on Coston Bluff. And she said, that's not East Savannah.
That's not a neighborhood.
She said, that's the east side of Savannah. This is East Savannah, the neighborhood. So it was, for me, it was quite an experience because I understood that East Savannah was a community, and everybody on the documentation, the video, represented East Savannah. You know, so
look at us. Shout out to East Savannah.
It was really nice to see that.
I know Jason's got something. Do you have a story that didn't make it into the documentary?
Oh yeah, the Half Rubber. That was one. Oh, yeah. Half Rubber was like it was this fun game that they made up in East Savannah, not the east side, but East Savannah. What they would do is they would take a rubber ball and cut it in half, and then take a broomstick, right? And they would play, like, it's almost like baseball. It's just that because the rubber ball is cut in half, it would be harder to catch it because it would bounce everywhere, you know? And I mean, just like learning about that, little games that were created, you know, in East Savannah was...
So many, like, that's like the different people, all the people are connected. Like, you will see one hand, the African American telling a story about a half rubber, and then on the other hand, a Caucasian person telling a story about a half rapper. So just because you lived on different parts of East Savannah, everybody was connected. Just like Naja said, it's like a community and everybody works together. Not no matter of segregation or not. It was just everybody was connected, and that's the beauty of East Savannah.
So what do you think in terms of, because I hear a common theme from all of you, so what do you think those stories about being segregated but then not so segregated actually, what does that say about our future and how we should move forward?
I think we should get better information, and because from what I see, everything that we've been taught in school is so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that proudly, and I do question my education.
Yeah, well, that's, you're supposed to be questioning. You're supposed to be questioning.
Read Ebb Flow.
What she said.
Anybody else want to contribute that was on the project or that is new?
We haven't heard from Amber Lee yet.
And Amber Lee was on the project.
Well, I mean, basically to answer Ms. Jordan's question, like, about our future and how we should progress, like, it's doable. You know, the East Savannah, they once were, you know, segregated. They once were, you know, whatever they were, and now, you know, it's evolved into something else. The generation we have growing up has made it into what it is. You know, it's not so, you know, it's not community. You know, I wouldn't dare leave my door unlocked in the daytime, let alone, you know, anytime. And, you know, the fact that they were able to live like that, you know, is possible. So if we could, you know, it's just something to think about, something to want to go back to. Like, if you can feel safe in your own home, that's where you should feel safe. So if you can, why not work to get like that, basically?
Here's the scenario. Yes or no? Do you feel safe when you come to AWOL?
Yes.
And when you come to AWOL, I always say to you guys have the power to create your own environment here. Yes or no?
Yes.
So if you take all these people in here and put them in the same community, you can determine how you want your community to be. Yes or no?
Yes.
So the past is not to look at it and say, oh, we can never go there. The past is to look at it and learn. And there's some things you can embrace from that lesson. I would love to experience that. You know, if you took everybody in this room who stayed in the same community, had a house on the same street, then you would feel comfortable with your doors unlocked, because we decided that we're going to determine the outcome of our community. And so the most important thing to me was just to be involved in that project and the history and the lessons that was taken from it, you know.
But more importantly, one of the things that we definitely, I think all the adults in the room want you all to take away is that your history definitely should and can inform your future. So you all have talked about, you know, it wasn't so segregated. I learned a lot. They were together. There was a lot of unity. That word came up a lot. It's up to all of you to go back into the community and to begin to do those things yourself. You know, I don't want us all to live on the same street. You all need to be out there spreading all that good energy. All that good AWOL energy needs to be spread out, and it needs to be spread out. It's up to you in this room to change how your community is, not us. Everybody's responsible for it.
My last thing here, we went to I think, I forgot what day it was. It was in the evening, and it was, you know, talking about, you know, the book, the Ebb and Flow book, and a few community members came out to get some people who featured in the book, people who featured on the video, and they were all talking about doing the project again. Would you guys like to see history documented this way again for Savannah?
Yes.
What area of town would y'all like to do?
West Savannah.
West Savannah.
West Savannah?
I think
Or you can do like
Every neighborhood has a history. Every single one. Every single one has a history.
I think
Downtown.
No, I'm saying like we should like think of a neighborhood.
One at a time.
Like
Tatumville.
yeah,
Well, I want to also give it up for your fearless leader who was with you guys all summer, Mitchell Powers.
Mitchell, you had a chance to actually see the pros and cons, the weaknesses, the strengths, and what were some of your things that you noticed that the kids either picked up from video technique or just from the history standpoint?
as someone who's interested in history, it was really amazing for me to go into these people's homes with all of you who are so young and just becoming aware of the city around us and its history and the ways that history reaches so deep into the past. And it was really special to be able to share that time with them and also with you and watch you absorb these people's lives and the seriousness and the respect that all of you gave those people who are sharing their lives with us was a beautiful experience, and I'll really carry that with me for the rest of my life. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Look at
I'm trying not to.
So how many of you after my block are going to go digging for some more Savannah history? How many of you know that? Have any of you ever thought about interviewing your grandparents or your relatives?
I do, but my grandma has amnesia.
Yeah, she don't remember nothing.
Yeah.
But I remember.
She don't remember nothing.
Michelle?
Yeah, one of the interesting things for me, I grew up in a family where my dad's 77, so he constantly talks about the Savannah, don't you laugh, that used to exist. So it's really amazing for me. One of the experiences that are very personal for me is before I even start these projects, I walk the neighborhoods with my dad. And my dad will say things to me like, there used to be this there. When we started the project, my dad said to me, there used to be black people who lived on President Street right here. Pull over here. Where that sign is that says LaPageville, black people used to live here when I was a little boy. He envisions a Savannah that no longer exists. And his reality as a 77-year-old African-American man is very different than mine as a 36-year-old black woman. So, it's a really valuable experience. I think that one of the things that I took away is the generosity of spirit. To have people open their doors and share their recollections, it's really, really something you usually don't get. People don't offer that to you. Yeah. And the amazing thing for us is at the unveiling event on the 19th, we got the opportunity to talk to some of the people. And one of my friends, Brian, has worked personally with George Olshig. And he said, Brian said to me, for years, Mr. Olshig has been saying to him, you have no idea how important my family has been to the fabric of Eastern Savannah. And at that event, he said, okay, finally somebody's got it right. So if anybody walks away from this with anything, it's that people feel validated. And all that we want to have happen is to have people understand. Every one of us just want to be heard. And that's what this project is about. We want to give people the opportunity to be heard. And without conversation, without hearing each other, there is no civil society. This city would not exist. So we have to converse. We have to understand one another. An anthropologist will tell you that we evolved language so that we can create society. So just think about that.
Good food for thought.
My grandmother, she's from the east side, not the East Savannah, but it's like, she was like similar to the man who said that he was glad that it was over. Because when she said that, whenever I asked her, oh, well, how did you like it when you were growing up? She would never talk about it because she was just so ashamed of it. And it was like, I have to go to like my grandfather, and it's like, he wasn't from here, but he had an experience of like working with the man, and like how she saw how her grandmother and her mother got treated, and like had to be she said she would never work for excuse my language, but like for a white lady like that, like she did for like her past generations, and that she said she would never do that. And I'm seeing how on the movie, the documentary that I just saw, it was like, wow, because it just reminded me of what my grandma said, and that it's not, I know it's not the East Savannah, but it's East Side, it's in Savannah, and it was amazing when I saw it, and why my grandmother doesn't want to talk about it, and I wish she would talk about it, but it's just, she remembers it's
traumatizing.
Yeah, the drama and all the stuff behind it. She just doesn't focus on the good days. And yeah.
So Savannah has somewhat of a painful history.
Yeah. It's painful.
Do you think it's important to tell that story though?
I really think it is.
Yeah.
Get it off your chest.
Get it off your chest. Let the past go.
I think it's important.
Right.
There's certain commonalities to every story. You know, there are people who have vocations, where they worked at, you know, avocations, their hobbies, people love, lose love, etc. I mean, that's a very universal story, but the circumstances are very particular to you. So when she talks to her grandmother, what that story of segregation and how it unfolded for her will be very different.
Mm-hmm.
There was one word that popped in my head as I was watching this document. That one word was Harambe. Let's pull together.
Oh.
Yeah, that word just kept scrolling across my mind of how they would all come together and talk about their experiences, either it was good or bad. The last word, the first word, the middle word, Harambe. Let's pull together.
Let's pull
I thought
together.
about that. Yeah.
So from our past, we need to learn to pull together.
Yeah.
Good takeaway. Good takeaway.
Awesome.
Dang. Y'all smarter than I was at your age. I gotta step it up. I gotta do some more reading. Good Q&A.
The impact that the Ebb Flow Project has had is probably going to go on for time. Certainly, the book is a repository of knowledge. People can reference this and will be able to reference it for years to come. But the amazing thing is, and I think this really comes out, we do an unveiling event, and we invite the citizens, and it is open to the general public. We give the publication away from free of charge. The events that are associated with this, the exhibition, the website, the iPhone application, all of these things are free of charge. But I think beyond that, aside from it being a gift for the city to give the citizens, the really amazing thing is that the citizens have ownership. We printed 3,000 of these books, and 1 week we're out of 1,500 of them. People are showing up. They're pointing to themselves saying, I'm on page 42. My uncle, I've had people call from as far away to this morning as Sarasota, Florida. My uncle's on page 62. Can you mail me a book? I think it creates a sense of community pride. But more importantly, I think a city like Savannah has a really unique history. It is defined by that 2.1 mile landmark district. If you look at Travel and Leisure and they say it's the most beautiful city or one of the most beautiful cities in America, that's what they're talking about. But in Savannah, there are other neighborhoods that have interesting architectural vernacular and amazing stories outside of that historic district. And those stories have value, and they should be told along with that history in the historic district.